In this tutorial, I'm building an Angular application from scratch, and I'm using public API to create this interesting game database website. I will show you how to set up a project using Angular CLI, how to create components, how to make HTTP calls, how to implement HTTP interceptors, how to make services. Also, you will learn how to set up routes for your application, how to pass data with routes in between the components. We will use pipes for data formatting, various Angular directives like ngFor and ngIf, and so much more. So stay until the end of it and you'll be in a good place to have a great foundation for building Angular applications. For project setup, I'm gonna be using for this Angular CLI. So for generating all the components, it's going to be Angular CLI and npm packages for others. So first, I'm gonna name our project ngVideoGame DB, stands for database, and I'm gonna set the style to be SCSS, as I like using more CSS for our stylings. I'll skip strict checking for this project right now, but I would like to add the Angular routing. Now the project creation has been done successfully. We want to head over into our root folder of our application, which is ngVideoGame.db, and the first package which I want to add is Angular material. I will add all the packages at the beginning and import them into our application so that later on we can focus on just coding. Type ng-add Angular material. For material pre-built theme, you can use whatever you want. I'm going to use the second one in this list. And I want Angular material to set up the typography styles and to set up the animations for our Angular material. And the last package which I want to add to our project is Angular Gauge. This plugin I will be using for displaying the rating of our games. So just type in npm I Angular-Gauge. And now when we successfully install all these packages, we want to import them inside of the app.module.ts. First, I want to import the Angular modules, Forms module and HTTP client module. Next are the modules from the external packages like Gauge module. Then we will import the Angular material modules. We will need matTabs module, matIcon module, matFormField module, and matSelect module. And now all of these imports we want to include inside of our ng module in imports array. And for Gauge module, we want to call forRoot method. The next thing, I want to remove some of the global styles which are per default set up in Angular application, and I will set up some my own rules. So for the body, I will use the Roboto font family. I will set this dark background. I will add some height and padding top. Also, I will set the same font family for all the child elements of body and reset the margin, padding, and box sizing. And the last thing is that we want to actually run our application inside of terminal cd to our folder directory into a root of our application and run ngserve. And when this eventually starts our application successfully, we can head over to localhost 4200 to see our application. Voila! Setup has been done. Now let's start coding. First component which I want to create is going to be search bar component. This component is gonna stay on top of our application for searching the games. So I want to head over into our app directory and make new one called components. All the components are going to be stored here. For generating all the components, I'm going to be using Angular CLI. So run the command ng-generate component search bar. These are shorthands, nggc. Now once that has been generated, I want to place that search bar component into our main app component. So let's take the selector of this component and let's put it inside of our app component. First, let me remove all this boilerplate code from the app components HTML file. We don't need that anymore. And I'll put search bar, app search bar selector there. That is our component. Now, inside of the app component.ts, we don't need this title anymore. So I will remove that. And now let's see how our component looks like in the browser. and we can barely see it because of our dark background, but that's going to be fixed in no time. I'll remove this boilerplate code from the search bar component, and this component is going to be very simple. I'm going to create on top of our component search container class div, and inside of that we'll have a form with a class of search form. The next is the logo actually, and clicking on this logo will redirect to the home page, so router link is going to be a slash. The next element is our input element. This one is going to be used for actual searching, and it's going to have a class of search input and the name of search. This one is going to be used in our template. And the last element is our submit button, which is going to be a class search button with the text of search. Once we click this button, it's actually going to submit our form, and we can take it from there. And this is how it looks without any CSS. So it's horrible. Let's apply some CSS styles to it. First, I'm going to create search selector, which is going to be the main selector of our component, and inside of it, it's going to be search container first. Width, it's going to be full 100% with a height of 60%. Background, it's going to have this color, and also we want to position this fixed so it's always on top of our screen with position of top and left to 0 and z index 1 to be 4. We want to align the items to the center of that. And this starts to look a little bit better now. For our form, we want to set the width to be 100% and to set the max width 1200 pixels because we want to set the max width for our larger screens and to center it with margin 0 auto. For our input, margin is going to be 10 pixels on the left side. We're going to give some small padding to 10 pixels. Width, it's going to be 300 pixels. And we're going to give a border radius to the left side. On the right side, it's going to be the button. And we want to reset the outline in border to be none. For our button, I'm going to reset border and outline to be none. Background is set to blue. Padding to 10 pixels. Also, border left, it's going to give some small edge. On the right side, we're going to set the radius to 5 pixels. Color is going to be white. Font weight bold. You're also going to give some transition for the hover effect and cursor to be pointer. It looks better, but it doesn't have any hover effect, so let's add that. Color is going to be blue on hover, background is going to be white, and the border is going also to be blue as well as the color. So it has some separation on the left side. Nice. The last element of our search bar which needs styling is our logo. So I will apply some margin to the left side, color to reset to be white, font weight to be bold so it's nice and separated, cursor to be pointer, it's going to be a link, and text decoration to be none. That's sweet. Now we want to handle submitting of our form, and we're going to catch ngSubmit event, and we're going to create onSubmit method, which we're going to be passing our form as an argument. Inside of our search bar component, we want to inject Angular router as a dependency, and we will use this router to redirect our application to our search page, which we will be building later on, and to pass in the value of our input field from our form. Inside of our onSubmit method, we are receiving form as an argument, which is a type of ngForm, and we're using this router to navigate to a search page, which we'll be building later, like I said before. From the form which we are getting, we'll extract the value and the search, which is actually from our input, which is called the search as a name. Also, we want to import the missing module, which is ngForm and router from Angular router. Now let's test if this works. Let's just type in some random text and submit now form to see do we get any redirection. As if you check the console, we can see that it's getting the error. So as we haven't set up this routing yet, but it's redirecting to search. And once our search bar has been completed, I want to create our first component from our two components which we are going to have in our application, which is home component. So we want to create new directory inside of components directory, which we will call home directory. And then using Angular CLI, I'm going to type in ng generate component home, which will generate our new component. Then I want to create routes for this component. So inside of the app routing.module, I will create path, which will be default path, and the component will be home component. And also, we want to all of our searches to land on this page as well. So I will add path search slash game search, which will be our parameter sent with our route. So the component for both of these route is going to be home component. And then the last thing is I want to create router outlet inside of our app component. So basically all our components, or actually the both of our pages, is going to be loaded in this router outlet, and on top we will have this search bar. And now if we check our application into browser, we can see that home component has been loaded, although we can barely see it as the text is dark. The first thing we want to implement in our home application is actually our filters component, which will be used for filtering the games which are going to be displayed on home page. As we first initially, when we reload our application, it's going to have a lot of game cards in it. So we will create a div with a class of filters, and we will use matForm field for our fields. This is from Angular material. We'll use matLabel, and we will put a label of sort. For our selection, we'll use matSelect component from Angular material. For class, we will set to be sort select so that we can style it. We will attach ngModel sort. So this is going to be a variable from component, which will be attached to matSelect. And we want to add some values. So we will have value name, released, added, created, updated, rating, and Metacritic. Now to attach this matSelect, we want to create this sort variable we just created inside of our HTML file. So we want to add that to our home component TS file. And once we created that, we can preview what we have created in our home component. As you can see, we have all the options we just added, but it's barely visible. So we need to add some styling. So let's head over to our home component SCSS file. First, let's select the filters class, which is a wrapper around our matSelect component. So we will set the max width to match the containers with some margin and also padding left, so it's aligned on the top navigation and the games which we'll be creating later on. So the next thing is we want to use ngDeep selector. This selector is used when we want to select some of the components which are generated from, for example, matSelect in this case. So for matForm field infix, we will set the background color to be this blue color, so it's actually visible because right now it's transparent. For the following properties, matSelect value, arrow, for the placeholders, and for the form field label, we want to set the color to be white and opacity to 1. For matForm field infix, we will set the border color to be white, border top to be removed, and padding left to be 5 pixels. For matForm field label, we want to set it to have padding left 5 pixels, so it has some padding on the text. And for the matForm field underline, so this is basically the underline underneath the selection. We want to set the background color to be white. And now let's preview what we got. Okay, the next thing which we want to build is our actual game boxes. So first, I want to create a wrapper for our games. It's going to have class of games. Then in this games div, we will have all the games generated and looped through Angular ngFor, but we will build that later. So first, create a class game, and inside of that class, we want to have an image. So it will have a div of class game thumb container. Inside of that container, I will put an image. This image is going to have a source. I just put some randomly picked image from the web, and it's going to have a class of game thumbnail, so we can style it later. Then I want to have a description below the image, and I will add a div with a class of game description and paragraph with a class of game name. So this will be the name of our game actually. And then on the bottom, I want to display all the platforms which are supporting this game. So div will have a class of game platforms, and an image is going to have a class of a game platform. Also for the URL, I will put now just some randomly picked image from the web, but we will later on fill in all the real data, and that is going to be a slug. So let's preview what we have now. As you can see, the images are really large, and you can barely see anything here. So let's apply some styles to this. Let me head over to homecomponent.scss file. And first, let's create games selector, which is for our wrapper. So I'm gonna put display flex and flex wrap to be wrap. So we want to wrap our boxes actually into 3 or 4, we will decide later on in a row. Justify content to be center, max width to be 1200 pixels, and to put margin 20 pixel auto. And those were stylings for our game wrapper that hasn't been affecting a lot our game box itself. So let me select the selector of game for our game box. The width of our games are going to be 280 pixels. Margin is going to be 10 pixels. So we'll have some margin around our boxes. Height is going to be 330 pixels. Everything which overflows is going to be hidden. We'll have slight border radius of 5 pixels. Background color is going to be dark. We'll have some slight yellow box shadow. And later on we will apply the hover effect. So once you hover over this box, it will expand. And we will add some duration of transition. So it has nice animation and the cursor pointer, because eventually when you click on these boxes, it will redirect to details page. Now let me apply this hover effect when we actually hover over these boxes. So box shadow is going to expand and is going to move. So translate Y is going to be 3 pixels. So it's going to jump a little bit up. The next thing is we want to style our thumb container, which is of our thumbnail or image. Background color is going to be black. So this is for when we are missing the actual image. The background color is going to be black. Position is going to be relative. Height 172 pixels. Color is going to be white, and text is going to be align center. So we will display there is no image when we actually don't have an image for our game. And for the thumbnail itself, we want to position it absolutely and to give top left and right 0 position, and we want to set margin 0 auto, so it's centered. Also for the height, we want to have 172 pixels. For description box, we want slight padding, so 20 pixels. It's gonna have display of flex, and flex direction is gonna be column. We want to justify content to flex send, and height of 157 pixels. For our name or title of our game, we want color to be white and bold. Font size to be 22 pixels, nice and large. For margin bottom, we want to have 20 pixels. White space is going to be no wrap, so that you're not wrapping, and we're applying ellipses of the text which overflows. So we have that 3 dots if the text is too long and it doesn't break the layout. For our platforms on the bottom, we want to have a display of flex, so they're all aligned. And for our platforms, we want to have width of 20 pixels and to have slight margin on the right side. So at this point, we are done at coding HTML and CSS on our code page. So now we want to create our service, which will actually fetch the URL and the real data which will be feeding in to our home component. So first thing which I want to do is I will create a services folder, and inside of that services folder I will create HTTP service file using the Angular CLI. So I will type ngGenerate service, and name for this service is going to be HTTP. And the Angular CLI is responsible for injecting our service into our application itself, so we don't have to do that manually. The thing which we want to do inside of our constructor in HTTP service, we want to inject the HTTP client, which will be dependency to communicate with our backend. So the first method which I want to create is getGameList. So this is the method which I'm going to be calling from our home component and fetching the list of the games. This method is going to receive 2 arguments, ordering and search. Search is not going to be required. Both of these are going to be string, and we are going to be returning observable API response game. This interfaces I'm going to be creating later on. So first I'm going to create the parameters for our method, and the default one is going to be ordering, so in order which we want to sort the game list. And if a user is providing a search, if he's typing in anything into our search box, we want to append also the search parameter as well. And the last thing, we want to return the HTTP GET method, which will be returning API response. This interface and the game interface we'll be creating later. The base URL of our service is going to be created inside of the environment file, and the route for this call is going to be games, and we are setting the parameters of params. Now let's create that base URL constant which we want to put inside of the environments folder, inside of the environments file, both inside of the prod and whatever the environment you have inside of your application. And then we want to import that environment as an env. It's a shorthand, and to use that as our URL. And now I want to import the missing modules, so observable from RxJS and HTTP params. And now let's create interfaces for our types, API response and game. So I will create new file which will be called models.ts, and inside of that file I want to export interface game. This is the main interface which we'll be using to define our data. So this interface is going to have types of background image, name, released, Metacritic URL, website description, Metacritic, genres. This one is going to receive an array of genre. We will create this interface later. Parent platforms, also array of parent platform. We will create this one as well later. Publishers, array of publishers. Ratings, again, array of ratings. Screenshots, it's going to receive the array of screenshots. Trailers, it's going to receive array of trailer. So all these array interfaces I'm going to create later on the bottom. The next one, I want to create an export interface API response, and T is a dynamic type. So whatever type we pass into our API response, it will return that as an array, results of array of that type. And now let's create the interface of genre. It will just have a name. Now let's create interface of parent platform. It will have a platform and a name property. Interface publishers is going to have a name property of type string. Interface of rating will have ID, count, and title. Interface of screenshots will have image of type string. And the last one is interface trailer. This one is going to have data and max, which is going to be a property of type string. And now we created all the models we need for our application, and which we are going to be using in this application. Now let's import them into our service. So for API response and game. Now, in order to consume our API, it's not enough just to set the URL which we need. So it requires some of the parameters and some of the headers to be attached to our requests. So in order to do that, I'm not going to set up the parameters and the headers to every single request. I'm going to do that on the application level. So to do that, I will use the interceptors. So Angular provides a way to do that on the application level, like I said before. The first thing which I want to do, I will create a separate folder for these interceptors. The folder name is called, obviously, interceptors. And I'm going to create 3 interceptors for our use cases. HTTP errors.interceptors.ts file. This one will be handling the errors, obviously. The HTTP headers.interceptor.ts file. This one will be attaching the headers which we want. And the HTTP-params.interceptor.ts file. And this one is attaching the parameters to our requests. So now inside of our HTTP errors file, I want to create an injectable service, and I'm going to export the class of HTTP errors interceptor. This class is going to implement our HTTP interceptor, and we're going to have a constructor, empty constructor for now. And on all of these interceptor, we need to implement intercept method from our HTTP interceptor interface. So this intercept method requires 2 arguments. First one is HTTP request, and the second one is HTTP handler. And it's going to be returning observable of HTTP event. This is going to be type of any. So we want to return of next, which is a handler for our request with a method of handle. And we're going to call a pipe, which is going to catch an error. So you want to do whatever you want in your application, but in my application, I'm going to log the error and I'm going to be returning the observable throw error. So you can handle however it suits for your needs. And now I will just import all the missing modules from our file, and the quick import feature from the VS Code is really useful for this purpose. And the next interceptor which I want to implement is HTTP headers interceptor. All these interceptors are pretty much going to have like 90% the same code. We are implementing HTTP interceptor interface, and this class is going to have a name HTTP headers interceptor. So we also have intercept method, same as on the previous one, but the body of the method is a little bit different. So I want to clone the request and set the headers. In the headers, I will set the two headers. First one is rapid API key, and the second one is host. And the key host instructions you will get on the public API documentation, where you will register for free and get the tokens which you need. And I will put all the links of this public API into the description of this video so that you can go and register and follow along with me as well. And also we can set actually on this interceptor the params as well, so that we don't need actually this HTTP params interceptor anymore. So I will remove actually that file, and I will put the params inside of a key property in set headers. And at the end, I will just return next handle request, which is the request we just created. So it basically attached all these headers to the previous request which we cloned, and it just emits the attached request with these headers. And once again, just import the missing modules from, you can use Visual Studio Code quick import if you're using Visual Studio Code, but pretty much all the editors do have their import features. And now when we are done creating our interceptors, we're actually not done. We need to insert them, import them into our application. So we need to go to app.module.ts file, and inside of the providers array, we are going to provide these interceptors. So I'm going to create an object with the property of provide HTTP interceptors, use class HTTP headers interceptor. This is the interceptor we actually created. And I'm going to set the property multi to true. And I'm going to provide exactly the same object for our HTTP errors interceptor. And I'm going to import these interceptors using quick import feature of the Visual Studio Code. Now, as we finally created our HTTP service and our interceptors, we want to start utilizing our service and the data, actual data which we want to get and to feed into our page. So let's head over to home component, the component which will be loading first initially. And I want to create a public property of games, which will be a type of array of games. This is the interface we created a couple of steps before. In the constructor, I want to inject HTTP service. This is the service we created just a couple of seconds ago. And I want to inject activated route. This is the Angular service. It is Angular service we want inside of the ngOnInit lifecycle hook. This is the hook which runs the first when your component builds. And we want to use the activated route params to subscribe to this event. This event returns the params, which is a type of params. And basically, we want to check in. We will implement later when somebody searches our games to this query of search text to be attached to the URL of our page. So when we actually load the page, we want to check first here, is there any game search queries into our URL? If there is, we want to call a search games method. This is the method which we are going to create like in next couple of minutes. So for this method, we're going to send two parameters, and the first parameter is going to be the sorting. And this public API lets you choose a couple of different options like date, when it's updated, when it's created, and Metacritic. This is by the rating methods. And the second argument is game search. This is the actual filtering. So if there is a search query into our URL, we will call this method with these parameters. If there is no search queries into our URL, we want to just call the search games with only sorting parameter. And now let's create the searching games method, which will actually call the API and fetch these games, this data. So search games method, will have two uh, two arguments, like we said before. First one is going to be sort, and the second one is going to be search. The second one isn't necessary, isn't required. So the both of these is going to be string type, and the return type of this method obviously is going to be void, so it's not returning anything. So we are going to call the HTTP service and the get game list method. This method is the only method we created into our HTTP service. And this method accepts two parameters. First one is sort and the second one is search, like we said. We want to subscribe to this event, and we are expecting back to get the game list, which is going to be API response, the interface we created before, and the type is going to be the game. And when we get that result, we want to feed in this game list property results into our games. And I'm just going to log this result so that we actually can see in our log what we actually got. Let's import all the missing modules the same way as we did it before. And now finally, if we go to our application into browser and if we open up the console, we can see the log object, and if you check our results array, we can see the actual games which we finally got. So the next step is to use this precious data and to feed that into our HTML and to make our page finally dynamic so that we get the games in our home page instead of this static content. So let's do that. And now inside of our HTML file of home component, you actually can access the games variable, which is now filled in with all the games which we retrieve from our API. So I'm gonna create inside of the games div with a class of games, I'm gonna create ng container, and this container is going to be using ngFor to loop through all the games and display them basically. I will assign the variable of game for each of these games. So first, I want to check if there is a game background image property. So if there isn't, we want to display a paragraph. So I'm going to assign ngIf if it doesn't have a background image. And I will just display text of no image. But if there is a background image inside of our game, I will use that as a source. The next thing which I want to implement, I want to, if there is a game name, obviously every game should have a name, so I will use game.name to access the property of name from our game. And then on the bottom we have a game platform. So some of the games have multiple platforms like PlayStation, Android, Xbox, PC, you name it. So we are returning this information as an arrays. So we want, like, once again, when you are using an arrays, you want to loop through these arrays and just display them as a separate item. So we are using once again ngFor to loop through game parent platforms, and I'm gonna create a variable named game platform to access these items. So I have downloaded from the web different icons for the platforms. You can use whatever style you want. But I have created a folder inside of the assets images platforms and put all of these platforms over there with the extension of SVG. So this is the reason why I'm using this URL, and I'm accessing the property of game platform .platform.slug to access this URL. This is on my local machine on my application. And for the alt of the image, I will just use platform.slug. And now we can go and preview what we got now. So if you open the browser, we can see that finally we have multiple games. So we have 4 games in a row, and you can see this. We have these nice images of the background. We have the names, the title names of the games, and also the various platforms. This looks interesting, right? Yeah. So the next thing which we want to do here, so as you can see, this sort doesn't work at the moment. So this is the thing which we want to do. We actually want, when you choose some of the stored items, we want to sort our games based on these sorting items. So, a lot of things could be done here. We could obviously improve, like the loading. We can add pagination. We can add infinite scroll. A lot of things can be done, but this is like the basic thing. How would you add some of the data into your page? How to make a page dynamic? And yeah. And now let's make this sort select menu actually working. Yep. So what we want to do is on our mat select, we want to catch an event whenever our selection changes. So mat select has a default event for this, and we want to call certain action upon it. So obviously I want to catch that event, and the name is selection change. So when selection changes, I want to call a function which is called search games. This is the function we already defined inside of home component, and this function we are calling on ngOnInit already, passing some default values for sorting. But now on every selection change, we want to pass in the sort variable which is connected to our selection menu, and it's defined inside of the home component. It's a public sort type of string. So every time the selection changes, we will pass in the new value which is updated, and our games list is going to get updated as this is already connected and hooked up. So we should see the changes right away. So let's test this out. And if we open our application now, let's see what we have there. So if we click on a sort and let's say just whatever, let's say released, and you can see that games has been already updated, I mean instantly. So let's choose something else, added, boom, yeah. So it gets updated right away. And if we check if we inspect our page and go to network tab, and if we try to choose another one, we can see that the request is sending with the parameters of ordering and the thing which we actually selected. So in this case, it's created. So yeah, looks perfect. And the final thing which I want to do on a home page. So if you remember that I said that we want to click on one of these games, and once we click, it means that we want to see more about the game and we want to see more details. So what I want to do is I want to bind new event on our div game with the class of game. So I will bind a click event, and I will call a method which will be named open game details, and this event we will just create in a second. To this event, we will pass in game ID so that we can open that game, fetch the API, and retrieve the more information about this game. So now let we head over to home component TS file, and let me create that open game details. So first thing which we want to do, we want to reroute our application to that new page, details page. So we will need a router for that, and I will inject inside of the constructor private router, which is a type of router. So I will use auto import from the Visual Studio Code. And now let's create the game. Let's create this open game details method. It's really simple method. This method will receive an argument of type of string. It will be ID. Will return void, so we are not returning anything. So we will call this router which we just injected, and we will navigate to details page and send in ID as a parameter. So the URL will be our local host, then /details, and then ID of our game. And that's pretty much it. Now it will give us error because we haven't created that game yet, so we will do that in the next step. But before we finish everything, I want just to do a little bit of refactoring on our home component TS file. So we have two subscribers which are left hanging, so we don't want that because we can avoid some memory leaks. So I want to create two subscriptions to watch out to our subscribers. So on top of our class, create route sub subscription and a game sub subscription. And inside of ngOnInit lifecycle, I will assign route sub to this activated route param subscription. And inside of our search game, I will assign this game sub to this HTTP service get games list to this subscriber. So we are catching these subscribers in these two variables, and we want to implement new on destroy lifecycle hook. So I will implement that inside of our class, insert there, and now we want to create to implement ngOnDestroy method, which actually implements onDestroy interface. So we want to check if this game sub exists. So if there is a subscription existing, we want to unsubscribe. This is when our page is closing, so that there is no any memory leaks. And we want to check exactly the same for route sub. We are checking if there is any route sub subscription. We want to unsubscribe. And now I will just add onDestroy interface into our class and import the missing modules for the subscription and the router. And we're good to go and implement our details page. Let's start doing that. First, let me create a details page, and inside of components folder, I will use Angular CLI to generate new component. So just type in command ng generate component details, and once that is generated, it's connected to our application, inserted automatically. And I want to go into app routing.modules file, and there I will create a new route for our details component. So that new path will be details slash colon ID. So this is the ID which we are going to get in the URL which we are setting from our homepage, and we are catching that ID of the game which we'll be using for showing the details of our games. So the path is details slash ID, which is going to be a number, and then component is going to be details component, and then we just need to import that component. And now let me test this new route which we just created. So open the browser again in our application, and if we click on any of the games, we should get the details new route and the ID of this game, and you can see that detail works. This is the HTML code of our new component, so the route works perfectly. We just need to start coding and put the details of our game in HTML code. So let's start doing that. On the very top, I will create a div with a class of details. So this will be the main class of our page. And then on the top, we want to have a banner, big banner with the image of our game. So I will create another div with the class name, a game banner. So inside of this banner, we will have this image, and the class of the image is game banner image. I will put some random image for now, but later on we will make this dynamic. And for the alt, I'll put background image. And this is for accessibility purpose. And below that, below the game banner, we want to create new div with a class name of game content. Inside of this div, we're going to display more information, more details about this game. That is the reason why user wants to actually navigate to this page. So I will create another div with a class name details wrapper, and inside of that div, I will create another one with a class game header. So this is going to be a header of our content, and below we will have tabs, actually, because it's going to be more nicely laid out if we have the tabs on our page. So inside of game header, we want to have a title, and I will create a h1 tag with a class name game header title, and I will just put game name here for now. Below that, we want to have a h2 tag, and the class will be game header release date. So we'll have a release date here. And below that, we want to have a genre of our game. So class, well, I will create a paragraph of class game header genres. And inside of that span bit, I will just put RPG for now. This is also, of course, going to be a dynamic. And then on the right side, we want to display the representation of our rating of our game. So I'm using the plugin MVL So I will create a div with a class name game gauge, and inside of that I will put our extension. So we will have a couple of properties here. So I will put I mean, I don't have to explain all of these properties, but you can see we're setting the class, the max, of course this is the max rating, start and end angle of our gauge, then the value, we're going to put the game rating. So this value is going to be a variable which we are going to define right away on our class details component. So it's going to be 0, it's going to start at 0, and then when we fetch the data, it's going to animate to the value which we retrieved from the API. Animated, obviously we want that to be true. Then color, we are gonna create a function getColor. So the color will be changing depending on the value which we're getting. So inside of details component, the TS file, I'll create a new method named getColor, and this method is going to receive a value which is a type of a number. So this is the value we're passing in from our widget. And the return type is going to be a string. So we are returning back the color which widget is going to be using to display the color on their bar. So if the value is above the 75, so it means that the rating is good and we want to return this color which represents the green color. Then else, if the value is lower than 75 but it's greater than 50, so we want in that case to return this is the orange color. And if the value is less than 50 but greater than 30, we want to display this yellowish color. And for everything else below the 30, we want to display the red color, which means that the game is bad, so the rating is terrible. And that's with our get color function. And then we want to set the animation duration. I will set 2 seconds so it's nice, slow, and it can catch the user's attention. Yeah, and on the bottom of this widget, we want to place anchor tag with the class name game gauge label, and the target is going to be underscore blank. So we want basically to put a link here to a rating, where the rating has took the place on Metacritic website. And that is for our header of our content. Below that, we will have tabs, material tabs, and we will store that in a separate component which will be generating just in a second. But first, let me first style what we got here. And let me first preview what is our HTML, how it looks like, and then we can style all of that and continue with our tabs. So we have this big image, which will be our background image, but it needs to be sized better. And our title, game title, is very seeable. We have release date, we have the genre. This is our plugin for rating, so it's 0 at the moment. And yeah, and this is Metacritic link. So this is how it looks like now. Let's style that. So inside of our details component, I will create a details wrapper selector, and this is a wrapper which I have created the same on our home page. So max width is going to be 900 pixels and the margin 20 pixels auto. So this is to center our content and to give slight separation on top and bottom. So position is going to be relative, as we are going to have a image floating and to be positioned absolutely. So inside of our details div, I want to style first our widget for the rating. I'm going to use ngDeep selector, Angular selector for the elements inside of as a child components. So this is the basic elements which are be generated, compiled at the runtime. The width and the height is going to be 150 pixels, and the display is going to be block, and slight padding to 10 pixels. For the dial, this is width of our stroke, so it's going to be 10. And for the value, I want to set dash right to be none and the stroke width to be 13. And then for our value text, this is the text which at the moment shows 0. So the color will be white, weight is going to be bold, and font size 24 pixels. For our game gauge div, position is going to be absolute. We are going to position it top 50 pixels and on the right side 0. And for our label, which says Metacritic, font size is going to be 20 pixels, color white, position relative, and from the bottom 60 pixels. Now we want to style the game div. And for the banner, the height is going to be 442 pixels and overflow hidden. For the image, we want to be the full width and to blur a little bit so that the text is separated from the background. For the content, we want to center it and position relatively, and to move a little bit on 200 pixels on top, because we want the text to be on the background, on the banner. So for the header title, I'm gonna set this huge font size, and to set the color to be white, also to be bold, and to set the line height to be the same as the font size. And I don't want it to wrap, so white space, no wrap. For the release date, also the color white and the font weight bold, and for John is the same. And that's what we're going to do for our top part. And now we want to grab our data and to make this page dynamic. So inside of our details component TS file, I want to create a couple of variables first. So game ID, this is the ID which we are going to be retrieving from the route. Type is string. The variable game, this is the variable which is going to hold all the data of our game. So the type is going to be game. This is the custom type which we created inside of our models file. And then two subscriptions because we are going to have two subscribers on our page. So route sub subscription and game sub subscription. Now we want to inject a couple of dependencies inside of our constructor. So the first one is activated route. It's going to be private, of course, and the type is activated route. So this dependency basically provides you with the API of the route once it's activated. And the private HTTP service, this is the service, custom service, which we created to communicate with our API. So now we want to create inside of ngIf, basically, we can assign our subscription to our route sub, and we can call this activated route params subscribe. So we are subscribing to our params, and we are getting back the params, which is a type of params. So we want to assign to our game ID what is sent through our parameters, through our details/ID URL. So we are assigning this game ID equals params ID. And then we will use this ID to pass into our method, which we are going to create in a couple of seconds. This game details, and we're passing this game ID. So let's define this method. Get game details, so it's going to receive ID, which is type of string, and we're not going to return here anything. It's type of void. So here we're going to have another subscription. So we are assigning this game sub to our subscription, so that we can later on clear all these subscriptions once the details page is closed. So we are going to call the HTTP service, and this method doesn't exist yet, but we are going to create that one in a second. Get game details, and we are going to pass in this parameter ID, which we're getting from the route. We're going to subscribe to that, and from the response we should get a game, the actual game which we want. Yay. And we will just pass in to our game response. And actually we want to update our game rating. If you remember that we have that widget for displaying animated rating of our game. So I want to set a timeout so that the user has some time to load the page and to see it a little bit delayed. So I will set a timeout, and I will assign this game rating to this game Metacritic, so this rating, after 1 second. Yeah. And now I will just import all the missing modules from our file using quick import feature of the Visual Studio Code. And now we want to define this game details method inside of our service, because we don't have that created yet. So let us head over to HTTP service TS file. And inside of this file, let me create this method. So the name is game details. Get game details. The parameter which is retrieving is the ID of our game. So ID is type of string, and we're returning observable of type game. So we will have 3 requests here, because actually we are combining all the information from these 3 requests into single one. So we will define 3 constant, game info request, and the URL of this get request is our base URL /game/ID. So here we will get the majority of information. Then we want to trailer, so we will display video trailers on our page. So this request is for that. So constant game trailers request equals HTTP get method, and the URL is base URL games/ID/movies. And the next one is we want to display some screenshots of our game. So the next one is this HTTP get base URL /game/ID/screenshots. And now we want to use a fork join to retrieve all of these get methods and combine them into one. So I'm passing game info, game screenshots, again game trailers request, and I'm using pipe to map this response. So I'm returning one object, and I'm gonna use all the information. I'm gonna use spread operator to use all the properties from our game info request, and I'm gonna create 2 additional properties, screenshots and trailers, to fade in the results of the additional 2 requests which we are getting. So we are get everything what we need inside of this get request. And the last thing, of course, is to import all the missing modules again. And now we can head over to details component HTML file. And inside of the source of the image, we will change this to be game background image. So we're gonna implement now our data. For our title, we're gonna set the game dot name property for a name. Then for the release date, I'm gonna use game.released, and here I'm using date pipe to format our output format of our date. So this is a pipe which formats the HTML for our needs, our strings. Now for genres, as we can have more of these, I will use ngFor to loop through the array which we're retrieving, and I will set the last index. So we will need last index in order to display the commas. So for name, I will use genre name, and then I will use ngIf to see if the last, only for the last, we don't want to display comma, obviously. So for all the others, we want to display comma. Then I want to, the last thing is for our label. We want to set the URL of the review where it has been, or the rating. So I will set the game Metacritic URL. And now, as you can see, this rating bar is animating nicely, and we have attached the Metacritic URLs here. So if you click on it, it actually gets us to their site, and you can see the breakdown of this rating and get more information about how they got to this rating. The name, obviously game name has been cooked up, and the release date. So we're using date pipe here to format this, but you can use whatever format you want as long as you're using date pipe. And at the bottom we have the genres. So as you can see, the comma is not on the last place. So the next thing which we want to do is we want to build the bottom part of this page and provide more information. So I will be using Angular material tabs for this element. So let's code that. But before we actually code this, we want to do a little bit of refactoring on our details component page. So I want to clean up all the subscriptions once the component is destroyed. Again, the same thing which we did on the home component. So I'm gonna implement on destroy lifecycle hook, and I will create ngOnDestroy method to implement that. The return type is void, obviously, and I'm just going to check if there is a game sub, and if there is, I'm going to unsubscribe, and the same thing for the route sub. And then I'm just gonna import the onDestroy interface, and that's done. Now let me create using Angular CLI our tabs component. And inside of the terminal, I want to open our directory source app component, and I will type in ng generate component game tabs. And once that is generated, I just want to head over to our details component HTML page, and on the very bottom, I want to include this app game tabs. So let me preview that hook up correctly. And as you can see, it is. So now we want to head over to our newly created app game tabs component and want to start coding all the details we want to display on this. We're going to have 3 tabs, so you will see in a bit. So on very top of our game tabs.component.html file, I'm creating a div with the class name game tabs. So this is our main wrapper. Then I'm creating mat tab group. This is the group of our tabs using Angular material. Mat align tabs is going to be start, and the background color is primary. So the color is going to be the color you choose for a theme when you install the Angular material. First tab which I'm going to create is mat tab labeled about. So we're going to have about, screenshots, and trailer section. So in our about section, on very top, I will create a paragraph game tabs pair, and the label is going to be platforms, and here we're going to list all the platforms of our game. So for now, I'm going to put the PC. Underneath, I'm going to create another paragraph game tabs pair with the label of publishers, and here we're going to display obviously publishers, so I will put Konami. Underneath, I want to create another paragraph game tabs pair. So all the classes are going to be the same. For these paragraphs, the label for this one is going to be a website, so we want to link a website to a game if there is any. Inside of a paragraph, I will put a link, anchor link, with a class name game tabs link. href is going to be a pound now, and target underscore blank. So we open that in a new browser, in a new tab, and I'm gonna leave that without a link for now. Then we want to put some description of the game. So I will put another div with a class of game description and put some random text. And below that, I will create new paragraph with a class game tab votes. So we want to have a votes of our game. Every game has a votes and a rating. So I will create two icons with the game with thumbs up and thumbs down. So I will use two spans. So span, and then I will use mat icon, which we included with the Angular material. The class name for this one will be game votes up, and icon text is thumb up, and we want to display the count of the thumbs up. So span will be class name game votes count, and here I'll just put some random numbers. So the same thing we want for the games thumb down, but the class name will be game votes down, and obviously the icon will be thumb down. So this is a font icon, and you just put in the text and you get the icon. So this is the icon for the thumb down. And I think that's all what we want to have for about label, about tab. So let me preview what we got. Okay, that looks ugly for now, but we will start that in a bit. So for the second tab, it's going to be a screenshot. This one is going to be very simple. So we're just going to have an image, and the image is going to have a class name of game screenshot. So we'll have multiple screenshots, but for now it's going to be just this one. For source, I will put a link from the web, and I'm just going to put a screenshot. And the last tab is trailers tab, and as you can see here, we're going to display some game trailers, and so I will create a video HTML tag with a class name of game trailer, and I'll put controls as well so the user can navigate. Source is gonna be just random video right now, but we're gonna implement that later on. Type is going to be video MP4, and we're just gonna display text. Your browser doesn't support video tag if you're using some older browsers. And finally, let me preview what we created. So as you can see, we have tabs, and we just need to style it a little bit better and to apply some styles to screenshots and trailers as well. So let's do that. Inside of the game tabs components SCSS file, so I will create a main game selector on top, and all the styles are going to be inside of this selector. So dash tabs. For the game tabs selector, we want to set the background. Then we want to set the color to be white to align all the text on the left side and give some slight padding. For all the paragraphs, we want to, so game tabs bar, we want to get some padding and to get the margin bottom to be 0 so that we don't have any separation on the bottom. For the links, we want to set the only color to be white. So as our background is dark, we want all the colors to be, all the text colors to be white. So for the votes, I will give some margin on the left side and display flags so they're all aligned. And for the count, I will give a slight margin on the left side so it's 5 pixels. And for the labels, I want just to centrify them, so justify content center. For our votes, I will put the colors, obviously for votes up, I will put this green color, and for the votes down, the color is going to be this red one. And for the counts, we want just to give a slight separation on the left, on the right side. On the right side, it's going to be 10 pixels because I want to separate votes down and votes up a little bit. And to align them, a vertical line is going to be super, so they're like in the middle. For our text description, I'm just gonna set this padding to be 20 pixels, and that's it. Then for our screenshots, I want to give a little bit margin on top, so it's 5 pixels. Then for the width, I want to give it 50% minus 10 pixels because we want to display 2 screenshots in a row. So this is why the width is 50 pixels minus 10 pixels is going to be our margin. So on every even child and child even, we want to set the margin left to be 10 pixels so that we only have the separation in the middle. And for our trailers, we want to have a width 100%, so the full width, and to give it just slight margin on top and at bottom. And with that, I'm happy with the results what we have for now. So the next thing which I want to do is I want to connect the data to our HTML page, to our HTML code. So we actually have fetched already our all the information which we are going to be displaying here, and the information is inside of our details component, inside of the game variable. So what we want to do inside of this child component, this game tabs component, inside of our TS file, we want to create a new input. So this is the input property which will be receiving the information. So input is going to have a name of game and type of game. So this is the game interface which we created before. So I'm going to import that. And then inside of our details component, inside of the HTML file, we want to add a property input game and to pass in our game. So this is the way how to share the data between the parent and child component. So we're just setting up the input and we're passing in our game. So at this point, we have all the available information inside of our game tabs. And now we just want to go and to hook up that inside of our HTML file. So let's do that. So first thing which I want to do is on our game platforms, I want to check if there is any platforms at all, so that we don't display this platforms label if there isn't. So I'm setting up ngIf game platforms dot length. So if it exists, if the length is more than a 0. So if it is, I'm gonna use ngFor for looping through our array of platforms. Let game of game parent platform. So I'm setting up this game variable for our platforms, and I'm just gonna use the last so that we detect which one is last, so that we don't display the comma on the last item. So I will just put in the game platform.name, so the name of our platform, and after that I will just set ngIf. If it's not the last element, set the comma. If it's last element, don't display this comma into our array. So similar thing I want to do for publishers as well. So we'll check if there is any publishers, if there is the length greater of 0. If there is, I want to loop through our game publishers array, and I will set the variable let publishers. Again, I'm gonna use the last index, and I will from publishers as well, I'm just using name. So again, I'm checking if it's not the last element, display the comma. If it is, don't display this comma. Then for our game website, again, I will check if there is a game website property. If it's not, so that we don't display this website label. I will put inside of href game website, which is the link of the website, and I will display exactly the same text. So I will put inside of the brackets game website. So it will display the link, the URL inside of the text. For the game description, I will use the inner HTML input, and I will just pass in the game description. So this will just put in the raw text. Now for the ratings, I will as we are also getting the array return type, so I will loop using the ngFor, because we can have multiple ratings. Usually it's just a one, but we can have multiple of them. So I will assign the variable rating from game.ratings array, and I will check. We get multiple ratings, and I will just display the two ones. So the first one is exceptional, so I'm checking ngIf if the rating title is equal to exceptional. So this is like the top. We will display our thumbs up, and we want to use the variable count. So from rating.count, if there is no count, we want just to display 0. And then for our thumbs down, I want to use the rating skip. So basically, if user has rated a game as a skip, we want to display a thumbs down. So rating title is equal to skip. And again, we're using rating count for this rating as well. And if it's not, I'm going to just set up the 0. Then I want to check if there is screenshots at all. So ngIf game screenshots length, if it's greater than 0, we want to display tab. Sometimes we don't have screenshots, so we don't want to display this tab at all. And if we have a screenshot, we want to loop through the array of screenshots and display the image. So I will use ngFor let screenshot of game screenshots. So in a screenshot, I will just use the image for our source, and that will loop and display all the source images. This can be optimized. I mean, And sometimes to display just uh, above the fold of the page, so so it doesn't load all images before it's seen. But we will leave it like this for now. And the last tab is our trailers, and the same thing as for screenshots. I will check if there is any trailers, because trailers as well are not displayed for every game. So ngIf game trailers length is greater than 0, obviously. So we want to loop through the game trailers array. I will set the variable let trailer and just gonna loop, and then just in the source input I will put trailer data max, which is actually the max resolution. We want to display the trailers of the max resolution. That is the property they used. And now let me preview. That is all the data which will be hooking up in our games component. So let me preview what we actually got. And now if you refresh our page, you can see that on the about section, the platforms are now hooked up array. And as you can see, the commas are just for the elements which are not the last. So the platforms are displaying correctly. Publishers, Rockstar Games, so this looks good. For the website, it's hooked up to their website, and as you can click them, it redirects you to the new tab. So this looks awesome. And below that we have the description, and as you can see, the ratings. They look okay to me. There is a lot of thumbs up. So this is very, very popular game. So if you look on the screenshots tab, yeah, that is nice. We have loaded these screenshots, so we have 2 in a row. This nice margin separation. So, and for the last one, we have trailers. Actually, for this game, we have multiple trailers. So let me see. Yeah, I'm not gonna play them longer, but as you can see, it looks correct. So this basically wraps up our application. So we have built everything from scratch. So just to sum up, we have this homepage which loads our games by default on Metacritic ratings. So, and we have built this search on top. So if we type in some game, let's say soccer, CLI soccer, we can get the previewer of the games. Also, we have sorting, so to sort games by release or any other criteria. So that looks nice. Also, if you want to check more about the game itself, you can click any of the games and we load up the details game, and you can see the URL we hook up there as well. And for this game, you can see now there is no trailer, so it doesn't display the last tab, but it displays the screenshots of the game and about section as well. So that's it.